Hey, welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm your host, TK, and I'm joined by
Vanessa.
Hey, Vanessa. Again, lovely to have you, and it's great that we are having another episode because it became, a habit, which is something I think that we want to talk about today, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. The compound interest of self-improvement through habits.
And you were the one that suggested that it might be a great topic to talk about today. So, why is now? What's important about habits for you today, this week?
It's such a big sigh, isn't it?
Mm.
Because I am really up against my edge with my habits and I don't like it.
Well, I rarely I see someone that really enjoys being up against their edge. So I guess we're in the same club. So would you be willing to share, Vanessa, in a way that would feel appropriate for you, to
Sure.
me and my listeners and our listeners?
Sure. So it is becoming increasingly obvious to me that I am somebody that I love being kind of in the future, like setting a big picture and, then distilling it down into some goals. And I've got a lot of grit. I've got a lot of drive. But I've been noticing that I've been getting the same outcome in certain areas. So one was physically, with fitness, but another was in my business. So just kind of feeling like I'm plateauing a bit, and then just kind of through. I hired a personal trainer, and I really like this guy because he's really into applying. He's young, he's reading loads, and he's applying it in his life. And so he's inspiring me. And, how can I make things easier? So what my tendency to do is, I'll set the vision, I'll get all excited, I'll drive really hard, and then I'll fall off a cliff, and then I'll have to pick myself back up again, give myself a hard time, and then start again. And that has got a lot of wasted energy and potential in that cycle. So I want to be more compassionate with myself through that process, but also the word that I think is probably the word that I need most is discipline. Ugh, I don't even like that word very much, which sounds awful, isn't it? Because it sounds so boring.
It does. True. Okay. I get your point, right? But on the other hand, it's interesting because it's a deeply human thing. Maybe we're designed to get excited. Maybe we are always, really looking forward to a bright future. But as the world is constructed in a way that it is, these things are hard to achieve. So I'm sure that many of our listeners are probably going through the same. You've mentioned discipline, and this is, I believe, quite important for any leader. But you also mentioned, obviously, habits. And I'm just wondering, Vanessa, if you have these two words, discipline and habit, how would you define them for yourself and for our listeners? Because there's various definitions, and I'm wondering how you feel about these two. You don't necessarily like the sound of discipline, but the habit sounds a bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I think about habits are the things that, they're the things that you do regularly. That then enable you to, sustain a change over time or to deliver on something. So they're the kind of behaviors, or, if I was talking about the gym, the reps, what are the actions that I need to take consistently and regularly? And I suppose discipline is the thing that helps me, achieve that. If I'm disciplined with myself, it's a commitment, and it's something that I commit to doing, and I track that.
And if I can maybe add a personal story, I've been reflecting, and if any of you listeners are following me on LinkedIn. I'm talking a lot about one-to-ones and management. And for me, like the reflection is when I've started as a leader, I noticed after all these years, now that I'm looking back to that particular time, what I'm noticing is I didn't have a habit nor a discipline of following up with people that looked up to me for leadership. We've talked about looking up, or the people that I cared for, but also reflecting on how well I'm doing. But the interesting thing, Vanessa, from what you just said, in terms of forming a discipline, forming a habit, is that my personal experience is that as a leader or as a person that wants to, take charge of their life, so a leader, even if you're a solo entrepreneur or leading a team, working in a corporation, there's always so much to do. So let me throw this out. I believe that this fancy word, habit, discipline, and all that, it's all wonderful, but sometimes many people think there is just a switch to turn on. If we get the habits in, everything will be hunky-dory. But the thing is, it's really hard to do all these things. We're only human and we only have the energy to push as much as we do, right? Otherwise we'll burn out. So, maybe, Vanessa, just entertaining a thought, the fact that some of us find it difficult to be disciplined with some things is just a natural reaction of our organism, of our mind, of our just human self to protect us from overwork and burnout.
That's an interesting perspective. I think, I think it depends on what you're wanting to have happen,
mm-hmm.
and how important that is to you. Yeah. So here's what I'm thinking. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different response is one of the things that we hear. And so often, what I see, like I had a client this week, and she's doing the same thing but pushing harder at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, how's that really working for you? It's not. It's a cycle, and it's a cycle where you aren't very kind or nice or supportive of yourself. You kind of almost set yourself up to fail. And I was listening to a video from James Clear, who's the one that we all think about with habits.
Yes.
And he was saying in there, this exercise, like, think about the goal that you want and imagine, like whenever it is that you want it by. So say, I want to do something within 12 months. Imagine that you failed, and then tell the story of the failure. Why did you fail? What happened? How did you show up? And then, kind of almost reverse engineer it and put the habits in that help you not do those things. And I love that, because like so often we're trying to avoid, well, I don't know, I can't say everyone is, but I particularly am trying to avoid failure. And therefore I'm pushing and pushing and pushing. And actually I'm not being smart, because the things that I'm pushing at are the things that I've always done. So it's just like,
and you know them, right? No, it's
yeah.
First of all, I'll have to ask you after our wonderful recording to give me a link, because I'm definitely going to use this technique, and I'm also going to put it in our show notes, so our wonderful listeners would be able to do it too. But the interesting thing, at least for me, from what you've said, is I have a very similar experience, but also a slightly different one. So I think of myself as being disciplined, but sometimes the challenge is I might be too disciplined, which borders on being stubborn. And it's just like you've described, it really resonated with me when you've talked about your client, that she was doing the same things over and over again. I can personally fall into this loop, and I know quite a few leaders and also clients of mine that do that too, which is some of us, including myself, have this belief that you've articulated at the start, that discipline is highly important. And when we're not disciplined, we guilt trip ourselves.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy. You need to go, right? You need to like do this, 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 this. It leads to burnout, obviously, but that's a separate matter. But what it does lead to is mindlessly sometimes making sure that things are done, repeating the same thing because it needs to be done, because that's the thing to do, isn't it?
Right. Right. And if you think about, so in the example that I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about with the client, um, the habit was a particular emotional reaction. So, someone fires off an email and it's like, what on earth are they thinking? This isn't on track. And then
Mm-hmm.
we're lost in this emotional reaction
Yeah.
that we do. And then reflecting and analyzing and working out who's in the drama triangle and in the head. And one of the other things that James Clear talks about is that our environment. So, two things: the system is the problem within us, and
As
then
always.
the environment that we're in is the problem. So, is it designed? Excuse me. Is it designed for helping us do good behaviors, or is it and making those ones that are hard, or bad, harder?
Yeah.
So, in this instance, if you think about, we start the morning with a clear, to do of what we
Mm-hmm.
you need to focus on. And
Some
then
do.
some do, big assumption on my part. And then something happens, an email flies in or something happens, and then suddenly we're in a reactive pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do we be in an environment that makes that reaction, harder? Like it's harder for us to go down that pathway. And, so he talks about having, you're being really clear on what's the habit that you're tracking, having a wall calendar,
Yeah.
putting stickers on it, and then just not breaking the chain. But it's something about, and that's what I mean about discipline. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of the hardest disciplines that I see in this client, but I also see in myself, is she's empathetic. And so the not getting embroiled in and contaged by others' emotions is really hard. And every time it's like, okay, it's going to happen, but can you come back to regulation? Can you notice that you've
Mm-hmm.
gone and come back to regulation? And, I know this is a challenge for me, like just working at home and then having other people in the house, and you're like, okay, respect my space. But
Yeah, and
actually,
it's
if I get
triggering, isn't
all,
it? Yeah.
yeah, and if I get all caught up in the irritation of that, then not only do I not deliver on things, but I'm also, drained of energy because I'm irritated. So
Makes
for
perfect
me,
sense, yeah.
yeah, so for me, it's like some of the questions that I've been asking myself is, okay, so I've got some big ambitions for myself and the work that I do. Am I in the right environment to deliver on those, or do I need to want to shift things up so that I'm hanging out with the people that are also doing these same things?
Mm.
So for example, this week I have been um, doing some accountability and work with someone who is also, setting up her business, and she's in Toronto. She gets up at 6 in the morning. I get up at 6 in the morning, my time. Yeah.
No,
And,
no.
I do my exercise. I focus on the things that I need to, and then we hop on a call. And what I can honestly say is my productivity has been great. My mood is good because I'm feeling like I'm achieving.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just a really positive, when I start to doubt, there's someone there that I can lean into and process with. It's just nice.
Absolutely. So, if we were to distill a habit that you've just formed that you believe is really productive for you, and it might also be very productive to many of our listeners, how would you call it and how did you form it?
I think it was organic how we formed it,
Mm.
but what I would call it is almost like a productivity habit or a accountability habit or a something, something like that. It's quite a masculine habit, if that makes sense. It's a doing, and it's a doing energy. And I think that's really helpful. I mean, it is helpful for me.
I'm always interested in, but then again, maybe it's not the direct topic of this episode, how, we associate some with more masculine and feminine energy, but, definitely something worth reflecting. But it's interesting, the habit of doing. I'm happy to drill into it some more, but I'm just wondering, like, definitely I would agree with you that, and I can not see but hear how much joy and how happy you are with getting the productivity, right? Which is, a possibly a reinforcing loop, because I am guessing that you probably want to do it even more with either this
Totally.
particular partner or more people. And that's the beautiful thing. But what are the habits? And we probably will talk about how to, break habits and the habit loop and everything later on. But in terms of leadership, what habits do you find are the most productive ones and the most productive and best and happiest, however you want to call successful leaders? What have you seen really works well for people in positions of leadership in terms of like what habits do they have?
So I almost want to ask the opposite of that,
Mhm.
because
Okay.
because in my head is the habit that I've seen the most that is derailing.
All right, let's go there.
Okay. Which is so I used to have this boss, and really nice guy, and he would be very available for people, wanting to
Hmm.
support, wanting to help out, enjoying the exchange. And so he would have his plan and his structure, but he would find it really difficult to boundary his time. So if someone says, "Have you got a minute?" It's like, yeah, 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 come on in. And I've seen that a lot with people. So
Hmm.
enjoying the banter, enjoying the interaction. Actually, if I'm being really blunt, enjoying the gossip of who's doing what.
We're
And
all
I,
humans, right?
but it's so like I really feel like we could work a lot smarter and less like rather than just putting the hours in. Actually, we could be a lot leaner with the way that we do the work that we do. And so for me, that habit of how do I structure my time? How do I have boundaries with people that they do the work before they come into a conversation, and they're not just chewing the fat or processing. They're actually clear with themselves why they're having a conversation.
It's interesting, and there's, we can talk about how they do that or did that in Amazon. That's a very good point. You've mentioned a lot there. It's interesting how, many people work through socializing. So the way I'm listening and maybe describing this habit is when the trigger happens of someone coming to you in the time that as a leader you have some focused work to do or something needs to happen, is just making sure that you don't go to a place of immediately dropping everything and serving the person or wanting to socialize, right? You probably want to
Right.
break this habit and replace it with something else. Having said that, I always ask myself about, okay, now this obviously causes the person to not have control on their time, to possibly having to work longer hours because of having to deal with that. But in the grander scheme of things, I'm just wondering, wasn't it making it him a successful leader? Because the way you've described the person is that this particular boss was a great manager. Maybe because of that, maybe because how sociable and how open and available he was. Maybe this is how he managed to be successful.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna pass comment on whether he was good or bad.
Okay, fine. Let's
but
let's
I
just let's
but
just
I
move on
think
then.
I think so in leadership circle
Mhm.
terms, we would be talking about what's the balance between the task and the
And the
relationship.
relationship. Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now bearing in mind, my reactivity would be in the, kind of pleasing side, the passive
Mhm.
side. So I am someone that will lose time to relationship. And I can dream people up in relationship. I can think they care more than they do. I can do all sorts of things like that. And so for me and maybe this is why this is such an important topic for me at the moment, is for me to, take that energy and put it into somewhere more helpful, is for me to move it into the achievement side, which is, setting some goals, being clear on where we're going, and actually making clear decisions, rather than, kind of hanging out, feeling. And I mean, it's the feeling side of it, isn't it? Feeling good, warm, fuzzy, all that kind of stuff. Great. And I think it's that constant balance, isn't it? Because I'm smiling to myself because I'm just about to do some work with a company where, what I'm told is that they are much more on the driving side. So it's like, oh, come out in the feeling, come out, hang out in the feeling side a little bit and the relationship side. But, I think what I am coming to a conclusion within myself is that I like the feeling side. I like the connection and all those kind of things. And it is not going to get me where I need to get to if I continue to, to kind of hang out so much in that area. And I suppose then what I see patterns of people around me, of myself, in that similar groove.
Yeah, because obviously we would attract people, and we are attracted to people that it's not necessarily are the opposite, but have the something that we admire or we like. For me personally, like if I were to go to, like you talked about the productivity, the habit of discipline, for me, interestingly, it's the habit of reflection that I need more of, because sometimes I drag myself too much into discipline. I'm too focused on something that sometimes may not even make sense. I had a stint like that in January. Thankfully, I've managed to reflect on that like, okay, fine. Why am I so focused on this particular thing? Because that's a goal I set myself and I'm hell-bent on it. But how do I build myself a habit on reflecting on various things, a habit of reflecting on what is it that I'm doing and if it's following what I want it to be? Am I living the life I want to live? Am I building the connections that I want to build? Am I serving the people I need to serve? Like setting aside this habit of reflecting is important. But there's another thing that I think maybe is important to talk about, which is the difference between habits and activities. What do I mean by that? And I think you've captured it quite well when you've talked about the habit of your wonderful client that, possibly reacted emotionally to certain events. That's a proper habit that some may or may not want to break. But what I'm talking about quite often, and when you mention discipline, it doesn't necessarily need to be a habit, because we can just put it in our calendar. We can just schedule it. I mean, for me, a habit is something that needs to be formed when there's like a trigger, which is either random or more intangible. But when there's an activity to do, can't we just have it on our to-do list or in our calendars? Do we need to call it habit? That's an interesting one for me that I'm exploring recently.
Yeah, so I suppose the other word that comes up for me there is consistency. So, like how if we have something on a to-do list and it's random as to when it comes on that to-do list, then we don't get that kind of compound interest of doing a small thing consistently.
So what makes us inconsistent? I mean,
I can talk about it's my feelings, right? So I think and this is the really uncomfortable part for me. If you take it back to something physical, because actually I think that's where most of my insights are coming from. It's like, okay, so I've been doing 2 weeks with this personal trainer, and I would say I'm not someone that's unfit, but it is hard and I don't like it. I hate being crap at something. I'm just like, it's really hard. And so
rarely anyone does like it, right?
No, but I have this dialogue in my head, and what I notice I do is I complain. Like, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. Like, why are you doing this? It's like, And that makes it even harder because I'm having I'm having a reaction to something, and it's kind of like, it's not fair. It shouldn't be like this. Why can't I just be one of those people that's born with a really high metabolic rate or whatever? Who knows, right? But I think that's what I'm noticing, and trying to have some humility and compassion with myself. It's like, okay, here's your ego, Vanessa. You feel like you should just get it now, and and you don't like this really sucky experience because it's hard.
Yeah, of course, it needs to be. Well, okay, so that maybe goes. This is sorry. The way I made this comment is maybe presenting my approach. And I don't know if you'll find it useful or if our listeners will find it useful. But in well, let's talk about fitness and so on, right? So when I push myself, do intervals when cycling, or when I try to keep my diet, and it hurts. My legs are sore, and I'm hungry.
Yeah.
The internal dialogue has shifted, and it can also be quite dangerous. But what I'm telling myself when it's the evening and I can't eat anything, it's like, oh yeah, this is what getting thin feels like. And when I push on my bicycle, I say, oh yeah, that's what getting fit feels like. That's just the way of the universe. It needs to feel this way. There's no other way. I'm accepting it. And if you want it, just have to feel it. That's cool. Yeah, that's nice. I'm happy that my legs are sore and I'm very hungry in the afternoon. I mean, it's like I've managed for these things, but there are many other things in my life where I do struggle, right? And some of them, like, you've mentioned metabolic rate, not that mine is any great, and some people are born with a great one, but sometimes I'm, socially awkward, for instance. And, like, I would tell myself, yeah, that's what networking or socializing feels like. I guess for everyone. It doesn't matter if it feels like that for everyone. It feels like that for me. So that's what I'm going through, right? So that's my 5 cents on how I deal with that. I don't know if it's any helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful and I love it. And here's where it's taking me.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listeners that are working in a corporate space and, oh, look, we've got this really sexy vision, like we've got it on the wall and we've got the values and, we're going to bring humanity to work or whatever it is that we're going to do. And then we're in the reality, and it's like, so what I'm hearing, the translation is, this is what it feels like to work. This is what it is. This is progress. This is, it's like, because I think you would probably share with me that a lot of people come to coaching reacting to the fact that we're not delivering on our vision, or we're not delivering on our objectives, and we're not where we want to be. And that, so we're having a reaction to the fact that it's not embodied yet.
You know what I'm reflecting on when I hear that is, okay, that will go quite deep, is the reality we're living in, which is quite often overselling us and under-delivering. What I mean by that is we're being presented by social media, by the environment, this aura of positivity, which is, look how people are fit. Look how many likes they get. Look how successful in various kinds of ways they are. And it's not fashionable to show the ugly side. It's not fashionable to show what really means. It's not fashionable to show, there's pain, there's hunger. Well, I shouldn't say hunger. It's just like being a bit peckish, I guess. But what I mean by all this is when you have these posters on the wall, when organizations are talking about change, it's not in a great tone to talk about that things will get difficult.
Yes.
Sadly, we're living in times where everything needs to be pretty wonderful, and it's just and I'm really frustrated by that, because we get business because of that. If everyone would accept everything as it comes, with all the sides of the coin, things would be much easier for many people. But sadly, it's interesting that, everyone is the best thing that sells, or the thing that sells best is the get rich quick schemes.
Yes.
And I guess that's that.
Yeah. And I think it's a shock for, so like in our industry,
Mhm.
the most obvious one is make 7 figures in a coaching business, right? Sign up to this program for 6 months, a year, 3 months, and you can hit this target. We will show you the way we do it. And here is our bulletproof way to this. And I think when we're really honest about that, and honest about, okay, so it may be a proven system that they have developed and works for them. And, do you do the work consistently to deliver on the system?
That's the one thing that's probably very cheap, like this small nugget of wisdom, like you have to execute. And,
Yes.
Many people would probably not make a lot of money on selling that. But then again, your personal trainer, that's an interesting one, right? Because he's obviously, and as coaches, we are there too for people. But that's a good example because many of our listeners could probably visualize that. Even though we're only on audio and they can't see us, but at least they've got our pictures. But he is a person, and you've said that he's very effective, that is with you through this hardship, right? He is, helping with motivation, and it seems to be effective, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what are you observing that works, that he employs?
So the reason that I picked him, because there were a couple of trainers, was that I just felt he was clear in his instruction. But more than that, he was really encouraging. And so that habit of encouraging and, like, well done, that was really hard, that's the kind of water that I need to swim in 100%. Like that really helps me because I'm like, oh, okay. But the other thing, he shares really simple things with me, because I asked him, what are your habits? And he's like, oh, I have a glass of water before I have a coffee, like really tiny habits. But what I like about him, so he's I think 28, and he was saying he's got twins, like one and a half. Can you imagine? It's like so full on. And he's trying to build his business. And what he was saying, because I said to him, what do you like around alcohol? And going out and socializing, and who do you hang around with? And he was saying, well, it's kind of really difficult now because people will kind of goad you into, oh, go on, just have a drink. Let's have a lot, don't be so boring. Where, you're no fun anymore. And he said, I'm really clear with myself. And he said, I don't always do it. And sometimes I give in. But when he was sharing that kind of anecdote to me, it just really made me realize about who am I hanging around with, and what's the impact of the conversations that we have on me. How does that, and where do I go with that? Because I'm not passive in those conversations. So if I'm hanging around with a load of people that are complaining, like, God, shouldn't be like this. Why is it so difficult? Whatever. Then I equally can jump into that space with them. Whereas if I'm hanging around with people like you that are saying, well, it's about execution, Vanessa, and this is what I say to myself. I say to myself, this is the work. This is what it feels like. Okay, right? I feel completely different, and it calls me forward. And I think that piece around, have you got the right support around you where you're flying like geese and you're lifting each other at different points? And I just feel lately that, I mentioned that person, but there's a few of us in a small group, and it's the first time I would genuinely say where I've been in a group where I feel there's a real commitment to supporting each other. And it feels so lovely. It's like no one gets, no one gets left behind. And that's one of the things, like we don't leave someone behind. And it feels great.
Oh, now I'm just like enamored with this. Not that I don't have these kinds of communities, but this was always something that I have craved, and I think we all deserve to have. Or if we don't, we need. I think it's best that we work to find it. But there's another perspective I think I wanted to extract from what you said, which is this encouragement that you get, right? And the encouragement from a coach, from a personal trainer. Dear listeners, if you think yourself as leaders and people are, and you serve others as leaders, again, not saying the usual thing, it is your job to provide that. That's what people need from you. And I
Mm.
think, and you need it too. And, I hope that you have leaders, coaches, or personal trainers that can give you that. But we all need this encouragement. And if you want to grow your organization, if you want to help your people be the best they can be, so their success is also your success, um, it's important for you to be this encouraging person.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
And I think that's so easy to say. And the challenge that I see for leaders at the moment is that,
Mm.
say we're in an environment, a tech environment, AI is coming, it's really competitive. We're not where we need to be. There's lack, there's scarcity. Then what we can do is focus on the gap. And then how do we make sure everyone's on the bus? Let's drive harder. And it's like, okay, that's going to get you so far and it's going to burn everyone out. And, it's like it's not the best strategy. It's not the only strategy. But I hear that phrase, is everyone on the bus? You need to make sure everyone's on the bus. I mean, what the hell does that mean?
It's a question that, what is it that gets a person to say that? There's this obviously famous rant from the CEO of JP Morgan. I don't know if you've heard it. They
No.
recorded the guy. I mean, our listeners can also look it up. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes where he was like, well, raising his voice on a call about how he doesn't like the younger generation, what he thinks about, working from home and so on. You can imagine what his thoughts were. But what I'm taking away from that is, well, he was sincere. I'm not supporting the language and the phrases and the tone he used. But when you think about that, what is behind the phrase, so everyone needs to get on the bus? It's fear of
Yes.
missing out, fear of losing, fear of insecurity based on the business going under. I think, sometimes it's just important for leaders, and this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying to show, yeah, I am saying to show vulnerability, to be sincere about what they really mean and why are they saying the things they're saying, because just saying the words may be, as you said, not understood correctly. But it
Yeah.
is important, if we show up as human beings, if you show up genuinely. Again, I use this word sincerity quite a lot on in my work. It then helps to bring people along, because maybe, just maybe, and you're right, Vanessa, it's not always the best strategy, but sometimes it's a needed strategy. But people probably want to understand why it is so if they are to be asked to push beyond what's normally acceptable.
Mm. Yeah. And I think, when you say fear, so whenever we set a goal,
Mm,
there is a part of us that is fearful that we can't deliver on it.
of course.
It's a stretch. It's uncomfortable, so it's like, yes, welcome that fear. Like, oh, just like you're saying, oh, this is this is what it feels like to go for a lofty goal or to go for a big vision. It's like, oh, you know, do we actually acknowledge and normalize that within our workplaces, or do we push it to the side, pretend like that's not there, and then use phrases to drive, which I actually think come from judgment. That would be my assumption. Get on the bus sounds like quite a
Yeah,
like,
I assume that you're not on the bus, are you?
yeah,
Right?
totally right. I'm looking at
That
your
I don't.
behavior and
Yeah.
I'm making assumptions. Yeah.
There you go. Right. That's. But then again, and we'll attach the listen to the CEO of JP Morgan. I think it's also a great reflection about leadership. And I'm not condemning what he did. It's just also a mirror that we can use to see ourselves in this particular behavior. And I loved what you said, Vanessa, about fear and normalizing it. But maybe this would be a good idea for another episode of our podcast. And ask to our listeners if you have other topics or something that you've heard today was interesting to you and you would like us to dig deeper in other episodes, drop us the line, leave us a comment on Substack, or just message us. We're very easy to find. We would love to hear from you. It's the 7th episode and we're always up for reflection and feedback. So there you go.
Love that.
Any last words, Vanessa, before we end the episode?
No, I just think I would bring it right back to celebrating. Hey, it's tough out there, and actually that beautiful act of celebrating, where is it working? It is such a lovely quality to have, isn't it?
And on that wonderful note of celebrating, I would also like to celebrate you, Vanessa, and our dear listeners for being with us. As always, it's a pleasure. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.